Welcome to Beyond My Crisis. I'm your co-host, Ron Rossnick.
And I'm Vivian Gaspar. We are here to inspire you to understand that if you become a victim or someone you love becomes a victim, you can turn it around and do something with that and not fall into, unfortunately, what's called a victim mentality. And we're so fortunate to have with us here Marisa, who embodies that very concept. Marisa Spagnoletti is a mother, a widow, a charity founder, and entrepreneur who is devoted to honoring her beloved husband's wonderful legacy in all that she does. She's a survivor of violence twice in her lifetime, and she's on a mission to end all violence, to honor all those who serve in our country, and to help so many. Welcome, Marisa. It's really wonderful to have you here, and I'd love to hear a little bit what helped you understand what devoted your life to this mission that you're so driven by.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very grateful, especially to talk about all of our charity work at the Marisa J. Spagnoletti Foundation, which I founded in 2014 after it took me a few years to get on my feet after my tragedy. As well, I care for my only child, who is now 12 but was 6 at the time of what the press calls the assassination of my husband, who was really the love of my life.
So what inspired you to create this foundation was the assassination of your husband. That sounds dramatic and tragic. Is there anything you want to tell us about how you segued from that tragic event to creating a foundation?
Through my auctions for charity and now my online company, we already have 2 boutiques. And basically, we sell handbags, accessories, jewelry, and gift items, and 100% of our net profits go directly to our foundation and then select charities to pursue my dream, and now it's the collective dream of many, to end all violence. As well, we pick specific charities. Everything about our charity mission is about not only charity, but volunteerism. Every year we're adding charities. We've added, several years ago, the PG Chambers School in Cedar Knolls for disabled children. This past year, my daughter had a very tough year. And being at Morristown Pediatric Hospital often, we are so blessed. We are now giving checks to Gorieb and the expansion of that pediatric hospital in memory of my husband.
Fantastic.
It's wonderful.
It is unbelievable. Good is contagious.
Right.
I want to be the voice for crime victims in this country, and I'm so in awe of your program and helping people to stop their crisis. And really, when you're a crime victim, you need to move in stages of moving from a victim to a survivor, and maybe one day I will be thriving again.
Well, that's the entire purpose of our show, Beyond My Crisis, is to show that your immediate crisis was twofold. It was your daughter's illness, and the tragedy that happened with your husband being assassinated. That is an enormous crisis that you had to suffer through. Now, we wanted you here to show how anyone who goes through a major crisis can go beyond it, can, as you're saying, can go from a victim to a survivor and thrive. But the main way you're thriving is by leading by an example, an amazing example that people can take a crisis like that, such large magnitude, and help others with it.
Right. So what shifted? What happened from you becoming a victim to you taking action? What inspired you?
We'd be here for hours.
Okay.
But
One thing then.
My very deep faith. And it's not just if you have a religion, it's my faith in humanity, my faith in everyone who serves this country. The final charities that we choose are to honor. My husband's case is blessed to be a federal case, but anyone who serves this country. How can we, again, I like to focus on prevention, coach our youth at a young age to be able to deal with crisis and overcome?
So one thing that you said is having faith, which is like hope, right? So when someone's mourning, when someone's suffering, where do they go to get hope?
In my case, I was very isolated and still am. If you look at the 9/11 widows, many of my friends. There was a group. If you look at Las Vegas, I am very isolated in my case. And I was not going to be the victim. Pursuing justice for my husband is everything. Now, I'm an outgoing person, but there's organizations, there's ways to seek help.
Right, so what do people do?
In Morristown, okay, there's an organization called Good Grief. It's available to anyone. In other situations, people have loss every day through sickness, through tragedy, through violence. How do you seek out? In my case, I had the support of my family, of my friends, but it was really strangers. I didn't know Vivian until today that I meet who say, I will stand with you, Marisa. We will do this together. And I try to tell people that in that connectivity is where hope is, to me, the end result. We need to have action in this country. Action. What can you do to get better at public speaking? What can you do to learn a new skill? How can you seek out a job?
So basically,
mentoring.
Right, so it's like having a reason why. So
Yes.
anyone that's mourning or grieving or having some suffering, they need to reconsider, why would they want to improve themselves? What motivates them? For example, you said that your daughter is part of your inspiration while you're doing things, right? That's because you want her to have the best chance and success at life.
I want her to understand that the love that our family share is greater than the evil that killed him. I want her to be positive. I want her at a young age to learn how to give back and care while also pursuing her own dreams and developing a sense of identity. So to me, as I said, it's faith, it's hope, it's love, it's support.
You had mentioned earlier that one of the ways you want to reach out is not just through your organization, your foundation, but you also help with others and to give as your own time, not just money. You were mentioning that you work with a not-for-profit that helps domestic violence victims. Can you tell us about that?
Well, 2 years of I love my former employer, Crow Horwath. I was a marketing director. But years into it, I had gotten a big promotion. I had to go into New York City. I started to talk about changing careers, and originally I wanted to be a marketing director for a nonprofit.
So the inspiration comes from your interest in helping other people, helping your community. And that's what we hope that any viewers here who have depression, who have loss, who have grief, they have to stand up and say, who can I help? What do I want to contribute to the world today?
I mean, we take action. My family volunteers, my daughter's in several organizations.
That's
No
wonderful.
matter where you are in this country, because we air right now on many stations, over 50 stations.
That's beautiful.
We're all over the country. So I want people to remember, just because we're sitting here right this second in New Jersey, there's always going to be volunteer opportunities no matter where you live. And it's so important to give back. It does so much for yourself. It takes on a leadership opportunity to show your children how you could do things to change your society and your community around you. And that's what you're doing. You're setting a fantastic
Thank you.
example. Your daughter is now going to carry on the tradition because she sees what you're doing. So that's how we can change our communities and our children, and the example spreads. I mean, I learned about our volunteering opportunities from my friends.
Right,
So
they
that's
call
a
that
great reach.
they call that modeling by example, which is a great way for parents to teach their children, not telling them what to do, but by being the person they want their children to be.
And I am undergoing the process in the state of New Jersey, 80 hours of domestic violence and sexual assault training. And I have been in the shelters, and I have been in a safe house, and it is life-altering.
Where you volunteer, is that always mandatory to have that extensive training?
At Safe in Hunterton, you need the 80 hours of training to be in the safe house, to be at the safe house or at the shelters. We have volunteers that just help with our events. whatever time you can give, find an organization, call them up, email them, get on Facebook, and ask them what their needs are. And that's how I really started to find this passion of stopping violence.
I feel so lucky that you could take the time to be on our show. You're so busy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Being here. And we want you to realize that you can help others on getting beyond their crisis by getting involved. It helps you, it lifts your spirit, and helps you become a mentor for not just your own children, or even if you don't have children, those around you.
3.4 million children are investigated by Child Protective Services annually. Of the kids in foster homes, 75% were neglected, 17% physically abused, and over 300,000 sexually molested.
I decided to dedicate my practice to helping people and parents who have lost their children.
Attorney Vince Davis has brought thousands of families back together, and he will fight for yours.
Welcome back to Beyond My Crisis. I'm your co-host, Ron Rosnick.
And I'm Vivian Gaspar. We are extremely fortunate to have with us today Karen Carbonello. She is the director of SAFE in Hunterdon, and they empower victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, as well as they improve their lives through counseling and legal services to help them heal. She also currently is an adjunct professor at Montclair State University, teaching social justice and family policy and victimology. Yes. I never heard of victimology.
Yeah, what is victimology?
Well, victimology is about what it's like to be a victim, what kind of services are available to help victims, and how the system itself can actually re-victimize in some circumstances.
How would a system re-victimize someone?
Well, by asking someone who's a victim to repeat the trouble that they've been through or the services that they've been through over and over, the circumstances. Each time you repeat it, you can be re-victimized.
So it imprints into their brain.
It does.
Some psychologists think that telling the story is a way to getting it off of you and out of you.
Some cases that's true, but it's at the victim's choice.
Yes.
And the most important thing to remember is that philosophy applies very much to adults, not to children.
We want to just have them get through it, move on, and
Yes.
lead the life of what they want in the future.
That's always what we want, right?
Yeah.
So we were here today to specifically focus on helping children who've witnessed domestic violence.
Yes.
And that's normally between their parents. Is there ever any other circumstances where there's other types of caregivers, like if they were adopted by grandparents, for example?
What's common?
Certainly. Well, it can be any kind of domestic situation where they could be living together, intergenerational homes living together,
Right.
for example. But yes, also where it's not a biological parent situation.
So please tell us everything you've witnessed in your scoping of being a director. How has this led you to focusing on children?
Well, first of all, when you look at the numbers, the magnitude of the problem of domestic violence, it's incredible. Approximately 5 million children a year witness domestic violence. And if you're looking at the number of adults who
In
are
the
living
United States.
in the United States, and the number of adults that are living in a household where they had experienced domestic violence as a child, we're talking 40 million.
Wow.
So the numbers are astronomical.
So wait, hold on. Let's repeat that again.
Yes.
40 million people, 40 million adults in the United States
have witnessed
or experienced domestic violence.
Yes.
Is that per year, or is that just an overall?
Overall snapshot. Those are the numbers.
Right.
Yes.
And that's in the entire United States.
Yes.
Now, my question is going to be, is there ever any pigeonholed socioeconomical group, or is this across the board that you've seen?
It's truly across the board. But remember who becomes visible, and that's the way I would explain it. And we talk about this in class all the time. The people that are visible are the people that are using services. So if you're using services and you're on unemployment and you're on social services, you may be more visible, and the unemployment situation may cause people to notice the black eye or the issue that has caused the domestic violence, and you become more noticeable. When it's in a more private upper class neighborhood where the homes are 5 and 6 acres apart, you don't hear the noise. So it's different. It's just, it exists, but it just is not as easy to find.
Well, that's why I think it's important to dispel these myths so people realize that anyone can truly be a victim. Man or woman, different classes, different levels of education, and all their children can witness this, regardless if they're in a public school, private school, any neighborhood or anywhere in between, correct?
Absolutely.
If our viewing audience wants to help one of their children, frame a scenario.
Well, first and foremost, if you're in a domestic violence situation, I would honestly think that you need to first and foremost safety plan for yourself and your children. Because if you're in a crisis situation, you need to think about how to get out, what you would do, when it's right for you, when you can make that 800 call, for example.
What if they're too afraid? I mean, we all know that people stay in these circumstances way too long. Are there ramifications that could happen if an adult, the person being the victim, doesn't get themselves and their children out of that circumstance that can happen as a result of that?
We say all the time that really it's the victim themselves that knows when's best to escape.
Right.
The
What if they
timing is
don't?
right.
What if they stay
Well,
for years?
They
They're
may
just
stay
too
for years,
afraid.
but statistics show the average woman has 7 times been a victim before she leaves. 7 times. But they do eventually leave. Statistics show they leave. It's just a question of when they're ready, when they're able.
So how do we help our children?
Well, one of the things we have to remember is that children see things differently than adults, and they try to connect the dots differently. So depending upon the development of their brains. So if you're only 5 years old and you see mommy and daddy fighting, your little brain has to look at this as affection and love for that person who is also perpetrating a crime against the other.
So the parents are modeling the way for the child to behave. We got to break that. So now now they become single parents, and one of the parents becomes the caregiver.
Part of it is to establish safety in the home. That's first and foremost, because there has been no safety, no stability, no predictability in the home before. Most children who've been abused, they feel on watch all the time.
Or have
watching
witnessed
for
the
cues.
abuse.
Yes, they're watching, trying to see, is this going to be the day? They hear the garage door. Is this going to be the fight that happens when daddy or mommy comes home? They're always on watch. It's called hypervigilance. And they never feel at ease. So if you have left the home and you're starting a home of your own, opposite what you experienced before with the child, you can start with small routines, predictability, family meals, things that make the child feel safe, secure, and stable.
Do you talk about the past?
You can. You certainly can. But I think it should be at the child's encouragement, or the child's time.
When they're ready.
Time.
When they're ready to talk.
Yes, because a child doesn't want to talk about it most of the time. A lot of ways that we help children to tell their stories actually is through art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy. The whole idea is to meet a child in their world of peer and play. So if you meet them in their world of play, sand tray, art therapy, music therapy, it's fun and they can tell you their story at a certain pace.
I see. So are there certain questions that you would ask a child while they're playing with their sand Japanese rake?
Well, I will give you an example. In a sand tray room, for example, all the little figures are staged by age and stage of development. So a 5-year-old is a certain height, and a 3-year-old's a certain height, and certain kind of characters are there. And there's a blank tray, and they take them and they make their story. Many times they bury the people they don't want to see.
Wow.
Or they kill them off. And you never make assumptions about what a child is creating. That world is narrated, the content of it is narrated by the child. So the child can tell you what that story is about. And that's what I mean by you never force the issue. You never force it.
How would that apply if the child's like 9, 10, 11 years old and that kind?
Well,
That's
many
age
times,
group.
yes, in that age group, many times art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, movement therapy really helps. Drama. When you're 9, it may sound silly to be playing with puppets, but you can say through a puppet something different than what your mouth can say.
So why do you call it therapy? Some kids think therapy is taboo.
Oh, yes.
So how do we break their ideology, which was really the ideology when I was a kid, but now it's still prevalent?
I'm going to tell you a quick
Okay,
story about
great.
a little child named
I
Luke.
see you lighting up for
Oh, my
this.
goodness.
I love that you're
Because-
so invigorated and
Okay,
excited
so
to
tell
tell
me
the
what it
story.
is.
Okay, so Luke was 9, and Luke was coming to us with music therapy, art therapy for about a year. Now, that may sound like a long time for a child, because typically it's not for years and years that they're in therapy. And one time he overheard the therapist talking